Nicole is the author of Patsy and her debut novel, Here Comes the Sun. She's a Lambda Literary Award-winner, a recipient of the New York Foundation for the Arts Artist Grant. She's taught the writing programs at Princeton, the University of Pennsylvania, NYU, Sarah Lawrence College, and City College. She's been awarded fellowships from MacDowell Colony, Hedgebrook, Lambda, Barbara Deming Memorial Fund, Hurston Wright, and Suwannee Writers Conference. She holds a master's in public health from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and an MFA in creative writing from Sarah Lawrence. She was born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica. She lives with her wife in Brooklyn, New York, and tonight she's with us here in Los Angeles. So let's give her a
So I'm gonna be just, try my best to give you a great reading and conversation. Thank you, Carmen, for that lovely introduction, and Miss Magazine, and all you wonderful readers. So for those of you who haven't read Patsy or don't really know what the story is about, Patsy is a story about a woman who wants to find her place in the world, and she does that by coming to the United States, feeling that this place is gonna grant her not only upward mobility, but the ability to love the way she wants to love. One of the main draws of Patsy was that she was in love with her best friend Cicely, who wrote her great letters saying that this is a place where they can be together. And so Patsy comes here with that hope that they will live happily ever after. Another thing is that she has a big secret. Patsy is really also running away from motherhood, given that she never thought of herself as a mother. And we'll talk more about that in the conversation as well, which is also highly taboo in our culture and also, of course, here as well. So Patsy comes here with all of that fantasy in her head, but meanwhile she leaves her 5-year-old daughter True in Jamaica, who comes of age questioning her mother's abandonment, as she grows into her own identity as well. So Patsy, at this stage where I'm reading Patsy now, it's in the middle of the book where she has arrived in New York City. She's working as a bathroom cleaner. And so this is a conversation that she's having with her roommate / her co-worker. So I don't want to over-explain the scene. It really explains itself. All right. Tonight, as Patsy cleans the bathroom mirror, Fiona talks freely about finally getting to visit Trinidad if all goes well. It's a slow night. The tip jar is almost empty. She tells Patsy that she's almost done saving to pay an American gentleman to marry her so that she can get her papers. Patsy's movement slows as she wipes water from around the sink. It's the first Patsy's hearing about this gentleman. You serious? She asks her roommate. Fiona pauses too, her eyes widening as she realizes that she has said too much. Fiona looks over both shoulders to make sure no one enters the restroom before she says, I didn't want to mention it before I knew it would be possible. In charging me only $3,000. Only? Patsy gasps. Some people pay more than that, Fiona replies. Then lowering her voice, she says, I pay in installments. Before you know it, I'll have my papers. Patsy frowns. That's a lot of money. And what about Alric? The marriage is a business one. Alric will be fine. He's really supportive. He knows that if I get my papers, then he'll get it too. Eventually. It might take a few years for me to get my citizenship, but once I get it, I marry him and he can get his green card. She's reapplying bright red lipstick in the mirror and using one hand to brush down her hair. She's meeting Alric to go dancing after her shift is over. He hasn't been over much since the incident the other night. Maybe it's guilt keeping him away. Patsy's grateful because with no money, she has nowhere else to go. However, the incident has bolstered her job searching efforts so that she can afford her own apartment. As soon as the papers come in the mail, I'll file for divorce, Fiona is saying. We got it all figured out. You don't have a problem with that? Patsy asks. If you want to stay here, you gotta do what you gotta do, Fiona replies with a faint American accent. She purses her lips. Maybe you should start looking for an American gentleman to marry to. What if I don't want to do that? Patsy asks. Then you'll always be illegal, genius. There's that word again that Patsy hates. Illegal. She's no longer a person, but an illegal, an alien. She can't understand why she's deemed a criminal for wanting more, for being in a place where she can live out her dreams, even if it might take a while to achieve them. You have to get rid of that pride of yours, Fiona tells her. It's not pride, it's caution, Patsy replies. What if the man take advantage? What if he demand more money, or worse, sex? What would you tell Alric then? Whatever happened to marrying for love? Fiona throws her head back and laughs. This time she laughs so hard that spit flies from her mouth and sprays the bathroom mirror. She cleans it with ammonia in the bottle she carries. Love? She continues to chuckle. When she's sober, she says, we can't afford to love in this country. We're not at that place yet as immigrants where we can choose love. Like everything else, we take what we can get. Grab onto any lifeboat so we don't drown in this place called America. Love? Love won't get with papers. You're saying you don't love Alric? You're not getting what I'm saying, Patsy, Fiona says, lowering the ammonia bottle. People die to get into this country. You think we have the luxury of choosing how to stay? So what if it's a sham marriage that might require a little sex? A little sex don't compare to the shame of getting sent home with two long hands. Alric knows that. He knows we have to protect ourselves and love small. Because if we delude ourselves into thinking we got a choice, then we end up with nothing. We end up with broken hearts and hungry families. We're only catching here. One mistake and we're gone. This is not our country. And immigration will do anything and everything they can to remind us of that. We have neither the right nor permission to enjoy human things like Americans. Vacation, rest, strolling in the park, the sunset. Who are we to do that when we're taking up space, taxes, and air according to them? They have all the power to punish us for stealing from them, for daring to think we can dream, much less love. Thank you.
We're going to start with this question, which is just that this story is so involved and so multi-layered and so rich. And it sort of, it crosses continents, it spans themes. There's so much happening in this book. And I'm just wondering sort of what the inspiration was behind the novel and what the process of constructing something so expansive was like as a writer.
So I was actually inspired by Patsy, to write Patsy really, given that I myself was traveling with many of these women and men on this train to the College of Staten Island. So I was teaching there really, this was like the fall of 2013 or 2012. And I remember going to work each day, 6 a.m. in the morning, tired as ever. But yet still these people were up and about, and they were, the men had their construction gears on, the women had their nurse's uniform on, or I don't know if they were home health aides. I also imagined somewhere nannies going to the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side. And so as me, like traveling with them as this immigrant myself, I always wondered about their lives. It was just a curiosity I've always had since childhood. The interior lives of individuals who I've never met before. They're just strangers. So it was on one of these trips where I was thinking about who are these people, who are they, what versions of themselves did they carry with them to America? What versions of themselves did they leave behind in wherever the countries they came from? And that's when Patsy started speaking to me in a series of letters. It was just this woman writing letters to her mother, like, "Dear Mama, I'm strolling in Central Park today," or "Dear Mama, guess what I saw, in the streets of Manhattan." So it was more like confessions to her mother. But then Patsy would not leave me alone, because there were times when I would be writing. I was still working on Here Comes the Sun, my first novel at the time. And Patsy would just come to me as this character who keeps speaking about her adventures in New York City. And I realized that maybe there's something more to this character that I want to build on. And it was really sitting with her for a while and just developing this character as this immigrant who, yes, like we all, as immigrants came to this country for a better life. So that was the direction where the novel was going before. But then I went to this residency, and that was where I was able to tap even more into this person, realizing that she actually left a daughter behind. And that was really where the challenge came, writing a character that I had to, empathize with in that moment of knowing what she actually did. And so that was really, for me, a good task to take on after Here Comes the Sun came out.
Well, and I do think I totally wanted to talk about, the moment when I was reading this book where I was like, I think I want to talk to this woman about this book, was the moment where Patsy is about to leave Jamaica and her mother is sort of scolding her, right? Like, you can't, what do you mean you're just going to leave your daughter? You're just not going to come back for her. You're not going to send for her. And her response is just to say, I want more. And this idea that she had wanted more, that she had never seen herself sort of having this life that went in this direction. And I find it really captivating as someone who 100% relates to the idea that I do not know what I would do if I sort of like woke up tomorrow or woke up in a year and was like, oh, now I'm a parent. Like if it's not something you see for yourself. Right. But it's still something I think that's taboo and uncomfortable, even in spaces like this one, even in sort of feminist spaces, this idea of like, how could a mother have left her child behind? And so I'm curious, what was it like empathizing with Patsy, and sort of what did it teach you about yourself and maybe these sorts of relationships that we honor typically in our society?
Right, yeah. So first of all, to write a Patsy, I had to also unpack a lot of things that I learned as a woman coming of age in this society where, we're socialized as girls to respect motherhood, that this is something that we ought to aspire to. And if we are mothers, that we ought to be good at it, right? So for me, while writing Patsy and realizing that she's none of those things, I had to really come closer to that character. She actually taught me more about humanity. Because the things that I would have been one of those people who probably were quick to judge a Patsy, without even considering all those things that were against her. First of all, Patsy didn't have the opportunity to find her own identity, to even walk in that path of like, this is who I am as a woman. She didn't even have the choice of being who she is in terms of, being in love with Sicily. She didn't have the education. She didn't have any opportunities. And so for that to happen, motherhood happened to her. So I had to place myself in her shoe. Like you just said, what would have happened then if I didn't have that opportunity to stretch beyond, what I was told I would have accomplished, and that just landed in your lap, especially in a country like Jamaica where for the working class Jamaicans, it's really hard to be upwardly mobile. You really have to have the money. You probably have to have the family, the last name behind you or something. Patsy had none of that. In addition to that, abortion is illegal in Jamaica. So even if motherhood did happen to her, she had no choice. A lot of women are walking around in Jamaica right now that did not want motherhood. It was just forced upon them because they could have been locked up in prison or that was it for them. So I wanted to, as a writer, I always wanted to step into the shoe of the character who makes the most unpopular decisions. I think they're more fun to write. But more than that, they teach me a lot about myself and also a lot about humanity as well. And so for me, the hope is also for the reader to just kind of challenge the reader to transcend their own understanding of the world and kind of empathize with somebody else. Who they probably wouldn't not have had a conversation with or dare to even look at and say, well, I still respect you and your decision.
Yeah, and I mean, sort of as the book moves along, I think something that I also thought was super unique about the book was how True, Patsy's daughter, True and Patsy do need each other, but it's not even necessarily in this parental way. In fact, it's almost it's not in a parental way, right? Like whenever Patsy tries to intervene as a mother, whenever she tries to perform this role that she doesn't really understand, she fails pretty spectacularly. And but what True does need is an elder. And I mean, I think, I've been talking about this with so many people since I read the book, this idea that, queer and trans people, we have elders, but they're very often not our family members or our ancestors. They're often sort of our chosen family or a mentor or, even someone you've never met who is an inspiration. Just like what True really needs is, and what connects her and Patsy is just this idea that someone needs to say, you're not the only one who has walked this path, and you're not the only one who has ever felt this way. And I'm wondering, like, was it a deliberate choice to make queerness and not, this mother-daughter fabric, the fabric that ties them together in the end?
Yeah, while I was writing True, I realized that, you know what, True is looking around her community. True, for those of you who have not met True just yet, is this gender non-conforming individual. Of course, she doesn't have the words to describe herself as that, given that, again, this is Jamaica. And so that the terminology, she doesn't have the words yet to find out, to say what she is or who she is. So True simply describes herself as a baller. Like she loves soccer. So that's her identity right there. But looking around, she's like, there's nobody else like her. And it's kind of an irony because, had her mother been there, of course, that they could have had a conversation about their queer identities, but she's not. Patsy had been gone for 10 years. The only correspondence Patsy had with True was that one card she sent on True's, the first Christmas Patsy left, Jamaica. So basically Patsy abandoned True. And so they're living parallel lives. Patsy's living in New York City, and she's, coming into her own in terms of, yes, she's undocumented as an immigrant, but also, grappling with love and relationships, while True, again, coming into her own identity. And I wanted that conversation in terms of mother-daughter, because most times we look, we're as queer individuals, we always look at our parents and we never really question them and their sexuality, or I never dare to, I don't even want to think about it sometimes, But then for me, I wanted to show that Patsy had so much to offer True. One of the biggest narratives around Patsy's decision to leave True was that she thought she never had anything to offer her daughter. She was afraid that her daughter would one day look at her and see emptiness or see her flaws, right? And that's another conversation as well, where, mothers are put on this pedestal in society, right? So there's not any conversation about, or even any leeway, like giving them the ability to have flaws, or even seeing that they do have desires as well and yearnings as well. Right. So for Patsy now, looking at her daughter and saying to herself that my daughter would look at me and see all these flaws and also see all this emptiness, it's best to just push her off and have her be raised by somebody else. And that was really the conversation Patsy was having with herself, not realizing that she had a lot to offer her daughter, like a lot more than she thought. And that was where I was going with that narrative of having both of them grapple with the same thing, in addition to depression that we're going to talk about hopefully.
Yeah, and that actually was sort of what I wanted to talk about next, was that in our review of the book, Alexia Arthurs, who wrote, I believe, How to Love a Jamaican, she sort of laments that it's an uplifting story in certain ways, but that it also shows a lot of, strife and suffering and despair. And your previous book, Here Comes the Sun, also sort of put this twist on this idea of Jamaica as a paradise, and really showed the ways in which, like women and girls are maybe suffering in this place, and queer people are maybe suffering in this place. Why did you choose to write such a difficult story? Do you choose to write difficult stories, or?
I think difficult stories choose me, because I always tell people I'm a realist, and as creators, as writers, we don't create in a vacuum. I'm really affected by a lot of things going on in society, not only in America, but also in Jamaica as well. So, of course, I'm going to definitely write that which is urgent, which I feel like I need to say, so also without being didactic, for sure. So with Here Comes the Sun, the frustration, also the question, the frustration, who owns paradise? In Jamaica, and also the fact that people see Jamaica as a paradise. People would rattle off all the great places they've been to, Montego Bay, Ocho Rios, Negril, but not see the working class people behind the fantasy. And that was really my drive to create a Here Comes the Sun. Similarly, with a Patsy, people would see these immigrants, working class Jamaican immigrants, or wherever the countries they're coming from, seeing these individuals, but not really knowing where they're coming from or why they come. Because that's another question that I used to get all the time. Like, oh my gosh, you're coming from a beautiful country. What are you doing here? I'll get it constantly. And, so in my mind, I'm like, well, you know what? Let me actually pose a question here. In terms of writing a book like this one, where people are actually seeing that, it's hard there in Jamaica, growing up working class. And it's even harder here if you're a working class immigrant and you're Black and brown. There's like a distinct difference, especially if you don't have the education as well. There's still that proverbial wall, pun intended, where there's no way for you to be upwardly mobile if you're not coming here in the tech industry, if you're not coming here in a fellowship. You're just coming here to do the jobs that nobody else want to do because people can now take advantage of you because there's nothing else for you to do to survive. So I wanted to get into the interior life of a Patsy who is now here cleaning bathroom toilets, being a nanny. Who is this woman? And then, of course, herself leaving a whole child behind and nobody really daring. Let's say had Patsy been in here right now, we would not know who this woman is. We wouldn't even care. She probably would have been here like cleaning or doing something, but we would not know what was going on with her, why she felt the need to leave Jamaica behind. And so for me, I wanted to write working class Jamaican women on the page because it's important. We've been so marginalized in the beginning. And for me to write about Jamaica, I had to write about our women and the realities that we're going through.
Well, and you've been working on the book for a really long time, so I don't quite know that you could have imagined that you would be releasing it in this current moment in time. But what has it been sort of putting this, letting everyone else meet Patsy at a time when there is such strong anti-immigration sentiment and also this idea that maybe, Patsy is an immigrant narrative that doesn't fit into that box of narratives that make people comfortable, right? She's not an immigrant who at the end of the book has achieved all of her life's dreams and is super successful and assimilated and doing really well. It's an immigrant narrative and you really slog through this process with her of, this struggle that she's in. And so I'm curious, has the reception been what you imagined or different? And has it been, scary, thrilling, great, courageous?
So I am enjoying the reception of Patsy. I'm really actually honored that Patsy has been well received. And even though having her name Patsy, the title of the book Patsy, and seeing it in bookstores and, having it in discussions, it's really empowering because Patsy is a common Jamaican woman's name, but it could be any woman. Patsy is not only a Jamaican woman's story. Coming to America and even we're getting messages from women from all over the country in the US, in Europe, saying, they were all mothers, mothers who actually have children and saying to me, thank you for this story, because they never had the ability, like the Patsy, to say, I don't want this. Motherhood is not something I want. In terms of that immigrant story, putting that in that, having the main protagonist be an immigrant, I wanted to write away from the whole concept of the good immigrant. Given that, as Black and brown people, there's always this quest to be as perfect as possible in order for people to empathize with who you are, your story. And I wanted to write against that. And so with Patsy, having that narrative where this woman has complexity, it was something that I really wanted to do. Not only is she on the border of has been an immigrant, but also her queerness. She doesn't define that for herself either. And also her womanhood, that's also not defined. Given that, here she's going on, she's sitting on the edge of whether or not she's a good mother or not. And for her, that was one of the defining factors of what makes her a woman. So here is Patsy and Chua are kind of defining themselves in a world that's really quick to define who they are, more than anything else. And it was just a coincidence that this story came to me before all of this conversation with our current government. But usually when people think about immigration, people never really thought about it as much before. I mean, it was always bad for immigrants, undocumented immigrants, period. Whatever administration is in power. It's just that now he's probably more vocal about it. But yeah, it's so good that it's now being received in this day and age when we need to have those stories out there as well.
Yeah. And I am going to open it up after this one. I'll open it up to everyone else. But it's just sort of to build on that too. This idea of, I love that you said that this book started sort of in these letters back to Jamaica by Patsy, because I do feel like, not even just because it oscillates between, you know, Patsy's story in the US and True's story in Jamaica, but I just feel like there's so much parallel stuff happening in the book between different characters who are in completely different places. And it feels sort of like a transnational dialogue. And I'm just curious, as someone who lives in that dialogue too, and writes from it so often, sort of what conversations you wish women were having across borders in this movement, and what conversations maybe you think we need to have more of.
Well, definitely that conversation about motherhood, the expectations of womanhood. Who is a woman? You know, what makes us a woman? And also growing up in Jamaica again, seeing how much it defines who you are. You could be anything in the world. You could be a doctor, lawyer, you could be anybody. But the question that you're asked by your elder is, but when is the child coming? And it quickly really, is like that question that really weighs on a lot of our heads. Like, when is that child coming? It could be the most powerful woman in the room. And when that question is asked, it could be like just, diminish like all your accolades and everything. And so for me, I would love a conversation about that. The fact that this does not make us a woman, and also empowering women especially, to say, well, you know what, if this is not for me right now, you can say it out loud. It's really interesting too that Patsy came out at the time too when America itself was also having that dialogue about abortion rights. And for me, growing up watching these women who had no choice to begin with, and then here, coming to this country where I came for freedom, to see that it's actually almost happening, it's kind of like wow, it's interesting that I'm running away from one place to the next where I still feel trapped inside this feminine body, and this Black feminine body. And so I hope that hopefully one day we can be free as women, because really right now, the people who are deciding those rules for us or putting us in those boxes usually are men in our society. And in terms of how we react to that or respond to that, a lot more women actually end up policing each other even more so, because of like wanting us, there's a whole respectability factor. Like, oh yeah, you're not a good lady, you're not ladylike if you don't speak a certain way, or you're not a woman if you don't do this, that, and that. That hopefully that will be eliminated from our conversation in the future. I don't know if I answered your question. I was like, what do you want about that?
No, I think so. I'm also down.
Okay.
Okay. I'm like, let's open it up. Does anyone have any questions for Nicole? Yes. Oh my God. Perfect. So I was going to be like, I forgot to shout you out. Everyone, this is Erin Kaplan, our amazing book editor at Ms.
Thanks. Well, I really enjoyed your reading.
Thank you.
And made me think about the fact that Black American women, I feel like I've been immigrants for 300 years and haven't assimilated yet. Yes. That's true of most Black people in this country. So I was wondering, in that discussion that the characters are having about what you got to do to be American, can you just talk a little bit about maybe your own experience, or maybe within the book, of how the Black immigrant experience meshes with Black American experience and diverges from it? It's funny, I live next door to a woman, she's from the Virgin Islands, but and I love her, but it's a different community. It's a different tradition. Yeah. And there's a lot of overlap, but there's also some, kind of separation. I'm interested in that dynamic, and just wonder if you could speak to that.
Right. So I can project too.
Away from each other, and then I won't talk to each other anymore. But
thank you. So writing from the perspective of a working class immigrant, most of us come here because we have been dismissed by our own country, right? We claim a country that don't claim us back, and so we flee because for better opportunities. And I feel like the same with African Americans. African Americans live in a country that don't claim them. And so that's where the conversation is, how dare us to look down.
That's a very sad statement, but it's true.
I know, exactly. Right,
It made me sad right now to hear you say that.
Right, exactly. And even in the book as well, Patsy thinks it when I don't know how far you've reached in the book, with the two men walking, and she sees that the scuffling, that this woman, fearful of these two men. And the same woman asked her, "Oh, I'd love to say to her, I'd love to travel to Jamaica at some point." And every American I've ever met. And then, you think to yourself, how would that person fare in a country full of black men, black people? And so the conversation there is actually, I want to start a conversation with that. And knowing that when I came to America, there was always this fear or this, the things that you're told coming to America, like, oh, the black Americans, they're different from us. But then, no, in standing my truth and also married to an African American woman, how different are they from us if we're coming from a place where we are not wanted? And I know it's sad to even say that, but I feel like the more I say it to myself, it's the more I realize that, well, now is actually the chance now to have a conversation about it and come together as a people, because I feel like that there was always that divide initially. And so that's something that I wanted to tackle in Patsy as well.
You did very well.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike. Who's next? Yay!
I just started reading it this morning, and I really, really enjoyed it. Is it patois?
Yes, patois.
So I had to sound everything out to myself.
Yes.
It took a little longer than normal. But I found it, it's real. And I really loved what you talked about her interior life, because at least that first chapter is all about what she's experiencing. And I liked that you weren't telling me she looks like this and she looks like that and that one does this. I like that I got it from her point of view. I've said that to her earlier, that was, I hate books when they say, oh, this girl had blonde hair and she's this and she's that. So, thank you. I'm really enjoying it.
Anyone else? Yes.
Hi. So I love the book title. Patsy was the name of my headmistress at girls' school in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I loved her. She was Chanel boucle suits. But Patsy also has another connotation of being someone who's like fooled, right? And I'm thinking of the idea of the American dream and how most of us buy into it. Were you thinking of that connotation as well, or is that my English teacher lens, hoping for another level? Or does that matter?
Yeah,
that's
I was
what I
not
got
thinking
from
about it at all. In fact, it was just more like, oh, I know a lot of Patsies, and that was it. Yeah, but you're not the first person who that doesn't have a meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I gotcha.
And they could actually project.
So I apologize that your book was totally sold out everywhere I looked for it, so I didn't get a chance to read it. I'm just curious, so I'm a professor, and I know you teach as well, and I'm curious to know if you've noticed anything about your students these days. Are they more wanting to tell their stories? Are they more about breaking the... I'm just curious if you would describe a little bit the creative writing students that you get.
So right now, well, mostly undergrads, and they're actually the undergrads I'm teaching right now. I mean, they're brilliant writers, and what they're doing, they're telling their own stories, which I'm really fascinated about. They're really tapping into a lot of stuff about identity, because I noticed that a lot of young writers, they like talking about identity, and I really welcome that, because no matter where they're coming from, it's important for them to actually voice that, and also be daring enough to tell the truths. So for example, there were individuals in the class this past spring who were very adamant about talking about the elitism on campus, but through the eyes of them coming from other parts of the country and seeing it for the first time up close and personal. And at first afraid to workshop it because they were afraid to offend people in the workshop space. But then having a conversation saying, if you're going to write, you're writing for you first. You're writing to voice something that you want to voice, something that you're trying to answer a question, a burning question. And this is how you do it. Don't silence yourself based on what other people would think or perceive you to be. And that was what I left them with in the class. But I'm really welcoming the fact that they're writing their truths.
Anyone else? like Judy all the way in the back. No, it's cool. I'm getting my steps in.
I loved the minutia of the daily life of all of it, and when I read the book pretty early on, I came in and said to Carmen, "This has to be her story, right? Because nobody can. It's not as if this can't. It has to be because nobody can just the level of detail about things that are pretty otherwise very uneventful. That it just I was blown away by that. And we had a lot of internal debate about how much of this, and just, no, it's not. It's fiction. It's totally fiction.
Right.
How did you get that deep into it?
Right. Very good question. So Patsy, for me, I always say that Patsy is fictional, and it is. 80% of Patsy is really fictional. But I know so many undocumented immigrants, and my father who came here, he came here driving the taxis in New York City, to send back money for us to go to school. I know his friends, my mother's friends, who are all, immigrants here working to make sure that their families are better off in Jamaica. And so those details are really from what I heard, because I was always this nosy child. I always eavesdrop in conversations, just my parents, like, so-and-so is in Queens and, she's not doing too well, or so-and-so is living in somewhere, and, so it's always that gossiping that I took from. And so, the Patsies are, for me, those individuals who, I wanted to write those kinds of stories. Here they are looking to America or looking to the UK or looking to Canada for a better life. And then the kind of that tragedy kind of realizing that actually they're no different from Jamaica. But then there's that pride, right? You never get those letters saying, well, this is what I realize America to be, or this is what I realize the UK to be. It's mostly oh, now I finally got that 2-bedroom or that 2-story house with a nice car, and here's the picture to show that, and here's all the snow looks. And it's always this fairy tale narrative that you get. And so Patsy was also inspired by that as well. Kind of the lies we tell ourselves as immigrants and the lies we tell each other. And so that was really where most of that came from.
All right, and then I think we'll go to the signing.
I don't know exactly what to ask, but it seems to me that there is no mother figure in your book. There is really a mother. Every one of them. Even Cecile, is it? Cicely, yeah. Even she has failed her son, she says. And Patsy's mother.
That did a lot, for her to come of age, realizing that, well, I don't want to be that mother. And realizing that for her savior, she's looking to Sicily and America to save her. And so Patsy saw from the beginning that because she knows that she was actually honest with herself, saying that motherhood is not for her, then she'll give her child off to Roy, who'd be a better parent. And he was a better parent raising True. But so was Marva, who is True's stepmother, who was a great mother. It's just that True, being in her teenage years, that teenage angst, really what she really wanted her mother, but took her all that pain and anger on Marva. But Marva to me was a very exemplary mother. And I thought Cicely was the most tragic character in the book. Cicely was really married to the American dream. Again, talking about the immigrants coming here, and you're coming for a fantasy, and by all means necessary, you will cling to that fantasy. So here she's clinging to that abusive husband, even though her son is suffering. But for her, it's really the image of what this perfect American dream looks like. None of us know what really the American dream is, but in these characters' minds, it looks something like what they're fantasized about. And that's really what Cicely was dealing with, as Marcus's wife and Shamar's mother. But hopefully that was, with a Patsy's character, I wanted her to also kind of come of age in the book too. I mean, I know she's an adult woman, but eventually, you mentioned earlier that Alex said that it's all the devastation. It's really a redemption story. Because here's a woman who ends up finding herself, finding her truth, and even daring to live it out loud. And so I wanted my readers to kind of leave feeling that this is a woman who had made that decision, yes, but at the same time, it would probably take years for her to mend the relationship with her daughter for sure. But ultimately, she ended up finding herself. And I know that's really hard to swallow, but at the same time, with the Patsy, she really didn't feel like she had any other choice other than that.
To you. Thank you so